Welcome to class. My name is Don Lafont, Professor Don, and this week in our Cisco 2 class, we are covering FHRP, First Hop Redundancy Protocol. I'm going to review the PowerPoint, and then there'll be a question and answer for those of you that are here. You can ask questions. And for those of you watching this as a recording, ask your questions, if you have any, in the help discussion forum, and your fellow students and I will be happy to help you understand whatever you have a question about. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Share. And I'm going to drag this guy over here. And I am going to bring this full screen, slideshow, beginning. And one more step, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller like that. Oh, can't do that. That should work. A little bit more. All right, so is about 29 slides in this presentation. Should take about 45 minutes to give, 45 an hour to an hour for the concepts. Let's get going. So first I'm going to explain FHRP, the purpose and operation of First Hop Redundancy Protocol, and then we'll explain how it actually operates. First Hop Redundancy Protocol, FHRP. So as you know, with STP is layer 2 redundancy for switches. Well, layer 3 is, FHRP is layer 3 redundancy. And it allows us to have a redundant gateway. So end devices are typically configured with a single default gateway IPv4 address. If the default router interface fails, then the LAN hosts lose the outside LAN connectivity. If your default gateway, your router goes down, obviously they're not going to be able to communicate outside of the network. This occurs even if a redundant router or layer 3 switch could serve as a redundant gateway exists. So we set up, if you remember, we set up a default gateway. We set it up here on this router. Well, what happens if this router goes down? This is the default IP address we enter into the system as our default gateway. So if this router goes down, this switch isn't even going to consider sending traffic to R2. First hop redundancy protocols, FHRPs, are mechanisms that provide alternate default gateways in switch networks where 2 or more routers are connected to the same VLAN. It looks like this, where we have multiple IP addresses that are connected to a single switch, and then that switch can have a primary and well, ultimately we're going to set up a shared third router here in the middle. We'll see. You'll see it in a minute. I was thinking there was a video studying that, but no, I don't think so. One way to prevent a single point of failure at a default gateway is to implement the virtual router. So the virtual router will show up right here. It's not real, but we'll display it as a virtual router for the purpose of teaching this lesson. To implement this type of router redundancy, multiple routers are configured to work together to present the illusion of a single router to the hosts on the LAN. By sharing an IP address and a MAC address, 2 or more routers can act as a single virtual router. The IPv4 address of the virtual router is configured as the default gateway for the workstations. So it isn't this one. It isn't this one. The IP address would be the virtual one in the middle, the one right here that you can't see right there. When frames are sent from the host device to the default gateway, the hosts use ARP to resolve the MAC address that is associated with the IPv4 address of the default gateway. The ARP resolution returns the MAC address of the virtual router frames that are sent to the MAC address of the virtual router can be physically processed by the current active router within the virtual router group. A protocol is used to identify two or more routers as the devices that are responsible for processing frames that are sent to the MAC or IP address of a single virtual router. Host devices send traffic to the address of the virtual router. The physical router that forwards the traffic is transparent to the host. So this device, the host, is sending it using the virtual information, and it doesn't even know that there are other routers that are in the middle. They're transparent. A redundant protocol provides the mechanism for determining which router should take the active role in forwarding traffic. It also determines when the forwarding role must be taken over by a standby router. The transition from one forwarding router to another router is transparent to the end devices. The ability of a network to dynamically recover from the failure of a device acting as a default gateway is known as first-hop redundancy. When the active router fails, the redundancy protocol transitions the standby router to the new active router, as shown in the figure. These are the steps that take place when the active router fails. The standby router stops seeing hello messages from the forwarding router. The standby router assumes that the role of the forwarding router. Because the new forwarding router assumes both the IPv4 and MAC address of the virtual router, the host device sees no disruption in service. Now, there are several different FHRP options. We only cover a hot standby router protocol, HSRP, in this class. Cisco provides hot standby router protocol, HSRP, and HSRP for IPv6 as a way to avoid losing outside network access if your default router fails. HSRP is a Cisco proprietary first-hop redundancy protocol, FHRP, that is designed to allow the transparent failover of a first-hop IP device. HSRP ensures high network availability by providing first-hop routing redundancy for IP hosts on networks configured with an IP default gateway address. HSRP is used in a group of routers, two or more, for selecting an active device and a standby device. If a group of devices In a group of device interfaces, the active device is the device that is used for routing packets. The standby device is the device that takes over when the active device fails, or when preset conditions are met. The functions of HSRP standby router is to monitor the standby router is to monitor the operational status of the HSRP group and to quickly assume packet forwarding responsibility if the active router fails. And this is where we have the video. Hang on a second. Let me pause my video and get that recording going. Oh, it's over here. One moment, I'll be right back. Okay, and here we go with the video.
Hello, and thank you for watching my video. Today we will be talking about understanding Layer 3 redundancy by me, Astrid Krasniqi. Objectives for this lesson is to describe routing issues in connection to redundancy, explain the router redundancy process and what happens when a failover occurs, identify HSRP and BRRP as a Layer 3 redundancy protocol, configure basic HSRP, describe the idea behind HSRP interface tracking, describe the idea behind HSRP load balancing, and identify GLBP as a load balancing redundancy protocol. The need for default gateway redundancy. Okay, I want you to imagine this. We have two routers, router A and router B. These two routers, they got connection towards the internet, ISP, and router A IP address is 10.1.1.1, router B IP address is 10.1.1.2, and they got a connection on the internal network or LAN. On the LAN, we have three PCs. PCA or first PC has got IP address 10.1.1.1.1 with a /8 or 255.0.0.0. The second PC has got an IP address of 10.1.1.1.2 with a subnet mask 255.0.0.0. And PC3 has got a IP address 10.1.1.1.3 with a subnet mask of 255.0.0.0. Now, these three PCs that we have to give a default gateway. Now we have two choices. We can do a default gateway router A, or we can do a default gateway router B. They can exit the network or local area network through both of the routers. Your choice. Say that we choose to do a default gateway 10.1.1.1. So all the PCs, they will use this as a default gateway if they want to go to the internet. That's going to be okay until we have a problem, because we want to use, if this link fails, we want to transfer all the packets through router B. Okay, so all the client machines, they're going to send the packets towards router A. And everything is fine when everything is working. Excellent. Now we'll see when there's a problem or when that link fails, because the default gateway for these PCs is 10.1.1.1, which is that router. They're going to just continue sending the packets towards that router. Even though all the packets that will fail because the link has broken down, or the link has failed, then all the packets that will be dropped. We have a working link on this side towards router B, but the PCs, they don't know that. You gave them a gateway 10.1.1.1, that's what they're going to send the packets to. Here comes redundancy. Router A and router B, they can create this virtual router with IP address 10.1.1.10 or 10.1.1.10. They create this virtual router and they keep it alive. This router or this virtual router doesn't exist. Router A and router B, they're gonna answer towards that router, for that router. So we have something called active and standby. So first router that's going to be active is going to be replying any messages towards that virtual router. So now we change the IP address from 10.1.1.1 to the virtual router, which is 10.1.1.10. All the gateway of the PCs has been changed. So now the PCs, when they send the packets, they will send towards the active router. It's the same as we had before. So all the packets are going to go towards the active router, but they are not sending it to 10.1.1.1. They are sending it to 10.1.1.10. Now, if the link fails, like we had earlier, because they're sending it to 10.1.1.10, and this standby becomes the active router, now all the packets are going to start flowing that way. These PCs, they don't know that one of the router has failed. They don't have to know. The packets are going to just keep flowing like nothing happened on the network. One way to achieve near 100% network uptime is to use a gateway redundancy protocol, ensuring that user traffic immediately and transparently recovers from first hop failures in a network edge devices or access circuits. By sharing an IP address and a MAC layer 2 address, two or more routers can act as a single virtual router. So we can have two or more routers on the LAN. The members of the virtual router group continually exchange status messages. This way, one router can assume the routing responsibility of another should it go out of commission for either planned or unplanned reasons. Hosts continue to forward IP packets to consistent IP and MAC address, and the changeover of device doing the routing is transparent. Gateway redundancy protocol type. We have three types: hot standby routing protocol, HSRP, virtual router redundancy protocol, VRRP, and gateway load balancing protocol, GLBP.
Okay, I am going to switch back to my presentation, and we can come back to the video if it seems like we need it. Okay, so back to my presentation. So the role of let me make sure I'm in the right place. Yep, I'm in the right place. So the role of active and standby routers is determined during the HSRP election process. Oh, one moment, please. I need to make this smaller. Oh, that changed, huh? 1 second. All right. By default, the router with the numerically highest IPv4 address is elected as the active router. However, it is always better to control how your network will operate under normal conditions rather than leaving it to chance. HSRP priority can be used to determine the active router. The router with the highest HSRP priority will become the active router. By default, the HSRP priority is 100. If the priorities are equal, the router with the numerically highest IPv4 address is elected as the active router. To configure a router to be the active router, use the standby priority interface command, and the range of HSRP priority is 0 to 255, with 100 being the default. By default, after a router becomes the active router, it will remain the active router even if another router comes online with a higher HSRP priority. To force a new HSRP election process to take place when a higher priority router comes online, preemption must be enabled using the standby preempt interface command. Preemption is the ability of an HSRP router to trigger the re-election process. With preemption enabled, a router that comes online with a higher HSR priority will assume the role of the active router. Preemption only allows a router to become the active router if it has a higher priority. A router enabled for preemption with equal priority but a higher IPv4 address will not preempt an active router. With preemption disabled, the router that boots up first will become the active router if there is no other routers online during the election process. So as you can see here, we have an active router with a priority of 150, and a standby router only has a priority of 100. But you can also see that as with the IP address of 2 and 10, 10.2, 10.6, actually this should have been, with a higher IP address, this would have been the active router, but because we set a priority of 150, this becomes the active router. So that's how you control it. Now, HSRP has states and times. The state, initial, the state is entered through a configuration change or when an interface first comes available. The learning state, the router has not determined the virtual IP address and has not yet seen a hello message from the active router. In this state, the router waits to hear from the active router. Listen, the router knows the virtual IP address, but the router is neither the active router nor the standby router. It listens for hello messages from those two routers. Speak. The router sends periodic hello messages and actively participates in the election of the active and or standby router. The router is a candidate to become the active router and sends during the standby. If it's in standby, the router is a candidate to become the next active router and sends periodic hello messages. The active and standby hot standby router protocol, it's the HSRP, routers send hello packets to the HSRP group multicast address 224002 on UDP port 1985 every 3 seconds by default. Those sound like good quiz questions to me. Again, the multicast group address is 224002, and it's on port 1985, and it's 3 seconds. The standby router will become active if it does not receive a hello message from the active router after 10 seconds the whole time. You can lower these time settings to speed up the failover or preemption. However, to avoid increased CPU usage and unnecessary standby state changes, do not set the hello timer below 1 second or the whole time below 4 seconds. Now, to configure HSRP, we use these commands. So you go to the interface that is connected to your host, and you set an IP address just like you normally would, and you add standby version 2, standby 1, IP, and then here is the IP address of the virtual router. 11, this is 10, that's 11, and priority 105, priority 100, so this is going to have priority, and then we're enabling preemption. And I'm looking to see 101.1 is, no, 101.1, that's this port, the port going to the virtual router. This is our virtual router address, 101.1. This is the network address. That's the network, and the virtual router is that one right there. So let's see this in action with the video here.
Is create a standby or this virtual router here. Now, what I'm going to open Notepad here, and the commands, we need to go to the interface. So say this is configuration for router A, interface FA00, and then we already have an IP address, so we just need to create a virtual router. We create a group, so that becomes the standby group 1, and then the IP address of the virtual router. So in this case, say 10.1.1.10. Then standby 1, and then we can say the priority 10, or say 110. The default is 100. A higher priority is going to become the active router. And standby 1 preempt. Okay. Now with these commands, we actually configure this virtual router. We do similar commands for router B as well. I'll go there. Same commands. Okay. Now, if I do the priority 110 here on this side, they're both going to have the highest IP address is going to win the election. So on this side, I'm just going to delete that command. So I'm going to leave it to default. Okay. So Control-C, copy, and paste this. So standby 1 IP address, standby 1 priority, and standby 1 preempt. If I go to the Notepad again, and this is going to be for router B. Copy that, and open the router B. Config T, and then paste that. Okay. Now, what we have to do is we have to go to the client machine and change the gateway to from 1 to 10. So change this gateway here from 1 to 10 on each machine. Okay, so go inside the PC, in configuration, and change the gateway to 10. PC2, gateway to 10.1.1.10. And then PC3, again, the gateway 10.1.1. Okay, now they have a default gateway has changed to 10 to this virtual router. It's going to be sitting, these two routers are going to keep alive. Okay, so as you can see, the router A has become in the standby first, and then from standby has used to active. So to see the commands is show standby 1, or just show standby. We can see that in the fast Ethernet is group 1 we are using. State is active. Then the virtual IP address for the router or virtual router is 10.1.1.10. Active virtual MAC address is this. Then hello time is every 3 seconds. Hold time is 10 seconds. Next hello and less than a second. And preemption is enabled. Active router is a local router. We repeat the command on router B to end and show standby. You can see that in state for this router is a standby. Active router is the neighbor router. Okay, so now all these clients, because he's the active router, all the packets are going to go this way until this fails, this interface fails. And then if that interface fails, this router will become the active router, and all the packets are going to start traveling that way. But the clients, they don't know that. The clients are just going to send to the real, to the default gateway they have. Okay, so I'm going to open the PC1, open the command prompt, and start pinging. I can go this way so I can arrange it. So ping that server 172.16.1.100, and I'm going to send 8,000 packets. Again, replies here. All the packets, if we look in the simulation, all the packets are traveling that way. You can see now. I'll open the router A as well. At the same time, I'll keep PC2 as well. Sorry, PC1 and router A in the same window. Okay, the replies are happening here. So if I go to router A and I shut down the interface, so interface FA00 shut down. Okay, we can see from router A now how many packets are going to drop, and until the router B takes over. Okay, we dropped 2 packets, and now router B has just taken over. All the packets are flowing because you can see that link is red, so it's not working. So all the packets are just flowing that way. Okay, because we have the preempt word, the state has gone to initialize state, but when we bring the packet back up or the port up, then it's going to go to active state. So no, shut down. So you can see that right away, after we change the state to up, it's gone from standby to active because of the preempt word. You can see we just dropped 1 packet in this case. Right, so if I shut down, now the packets are going to start flowing towards router B. I'm going to go that way. We lost 1 packet. I'll bring the port back up. Now it's going to go towards router A. Yeah, we dropped 1 packet. Okay, thank you very much for watching. This has been SRWE showing you how to configure HSRP. Goodbye.
Hopefully you did a great job showing you that because he's how I understood the concepts. I highly recommend Astrid Koinichi, by the way, to learn and review many of the concepts we learn in this class and get ready for your CCNA. He definitely does a great job. You can find him on YouTube without a problem. He has 100 videos to share that he's willing to share. All right, you will do 1 packet in this week. It is on HSRP configuration, and you will get to configure an HSRP active router, configure a standby router, and to verify that it is working. That is it for tonight's presentation. Promised you it wasn't going to be very long. So if you are watching, let me stop sharing. If you are watching this presentation right now, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, if you're watching this as a recording, please ask your questions inside of our help discussion forum, and your fellow students and I will be happy to help you. Again, my name's Don LaFont, Professor Don, and I hope you have a fantastic week. I'll see you in a week. Enjoy the chapter and learning more about Cisco.